So, hi everyone. Thank you for joining us for our very first Life After Graduation talks. This has been brought to you in collaboration with the IAST with VAV in the form of the SARC. The SARC is the Student Alumni Relations Cell. Our aim is to promote interactions between alumni and the current student community and hope that all the experience and knowledge from the alumni actually reach the students. So, to start off with our first speaker of the day, we have Rachna Reddy. You guys all must have read the post, but let me give her intro once again. Rachna is currently a development engineer with the satellite company Berlin Space Technologies in Germany. She has previously worked with ISRO as well as the German Aerospace Center DLR. In her free time, she hosts a podcast series, Those Space People, and writes about space laws, business, and technology. During her time in IST, she was a very active student, and she did tell us that she used to conduct these webinars for her batchmates. She was also part of the NanoSat team. So I guess I'll give it over to Rachna ma'am anytime you want.
Hey people, hello everyone. It's really nice to be back and connect with the student community again, IIST, and even those few guys joining from outside. So yeah, so let me tell you a little briefly. I know you guys are like super sick and tired of listening to people go on and on, so I'll try to make it a little interesting. Yeah, so I was actually from the second batch of IIST, and I took up avionics, and I graduated in 2012, and then I joined Adrin. So I'm from Hyderabad, and one of the biggest reasons I took Adrin was one thing, they were doing some cool FPGA stuff, and I think primarily I was too lazy, so I just wanted to live with my parents, so I took up Adrin, and then I joined. It was quite fun. So I was working on a lot of research projects. So this was the first time we started developing this real-time processing, real-time processing of satellite data, and we were involved in really exciting projects. So I joined there, and I spent about 5 years there. So 3 years into my job, I started to get a little restless, and looking for other opportunities. I wouldn't say opportunities, but I was just looking around. And so at this around 2015, so a couple of my seniors, so the first batch of IAST, these guys started a few companies, and I don't know if you guys know of Team Indus, and some of them went into Team Indus, and some people started their own companies. A lot of my seniors started leaving and going to, for masters out of ISRO, out of India, out of the country, pursuing like crazy new things. And then I started interacting with my seniors, and that's how I got to know about the Space Up. So I don't know if you guys have attended the Space Up conference. It's an unconference. Do check it out. I think IIST still conducts the Space Up conferences. So yeah, so we then thought, okay, Space Up is a great way. It's an unconference, and let's organize something like this at IIST because it's never been done before. And then we started, and this way I got to meet people outside of the ISRO fraternity, because when you're in IIST and then ISRO, the only space people you get to meet are the ISRO people and your fellow IISTians. And then we started meeting, but back then, 2015, it was very, very few people who were, there were hardly any startups, maybe one or two space startups, and very little space activity happening outside of ISRO. So yeah, so we through the Space Up, I met a lot of interesting people, and then I got introduced to this, and then I realized there is something called um, a space law course. So probably some of you guys know about this, but there's something called firstly, there's a field called space law. Yeah, you can Google about it. I don't want to talk about that right now. But yeah, so there was this interesting course by the Nalsar University. It's one of the prominent law universities in Hyderabad, and they were organizing professional masters. So I thought, oh, this is really interesting. This is really cool. And I signed up for it because one of the biggest reasons, I don't have to leave my job, I can work. And these classes used to be held during the weekends. So we used to, so yeah, I signed up for this course, and I've had like a lot of fun for these 2 years. It was like coming back to university, it was starting to miss IIST, like you guys are missing the IIST campus. I was also missing the student life. And this master course was quite awesome. And then in my class, I had a bunch of lawyers. So we were like a group of 15, 20 people. And half of us were engineers and half of us were lawyers, actually practicing lawyers who would practice in these high courts of different states in the country, right? And then the way we would approach, there was a very clear distinction between how engineers look at space law, because of course, if you want to practice space law, you should know the technology aspects, you should also know the legal aspects, and how lawyers look at a problem and how engineers look at a problem was like super amazing. So yeah, I had a really fabulous time. So that's when I did my master in space and telecommunications laws from Nalsar. So that was me 3 years into my ISRO job. And through this, I started meeting a lot of community outside of ISRO. And then back then there were very few events, right? There were very few space events or conferences happening which were outside of ISRO. And then I came to know about these conferences, these events, and I started attending these events. And it's usually difficult to attend events or pursue things independently if you're an ISRO employee. You'll have to jump through a lot of hoops. There's a lot of bureaucracy, permissions, blah blah blah. So, but being a student, it was quite easy for me because I would just tell my boss, or didn't really have to tell anybody. I would just say, hey, I'm a student, I'm a space law student, and here I am at this conference because this is useful for me. So that way I started interacting, I started meeting people, and at these events, I also ran into a lot of people from abroad who had their own companies, who would visit India and participate in these international conferences. And then it was really interesting the way we look at space, the cultural differences, the way people from other countries, the way people from other cultures look at things, and it was really fascinating to me. And then I thought, I've been in this ISRO in the whole, because technically when you join IAST, that's when you're basically part of this ISRO community. So, okay, so 4 + 3, 7 years have already spent in this community. Let me try to explore what's happening outside the country in space. And then I started exploring what other avenues, other options. But then, it's very difficult to leave an ISRO job because you're very secure. It's really fun. You're really you put on a pedestal, basically. Your community, your family, your neighbors, everybody talks really highly of you, and the work was really exciting. So I wasn't completely sure about this, but then I was really motivated to do something more. I was not completely satisfied. I wanted to do much more. And then I started looking at ways to do other things to satisfy my I don't know, the cravings of doing more things by staying in ISRO. And since I was also doing this MSTL, the Master of Space Law course, I used to engage quite closely with the headquarters. So there was one senior scientist at headquarters. That's where all the space policy in India, that's where ISRO does all the policy work, the space policy work. And I tried to get into that, get a transfer to that department, but somehow it didn't happen, because back then the idea was for an engineer, the system was not really ready for someone so young early in their career to simply move to the headquarters. So they expected me to spend, I don't know, 10 to 20 years in a center doing technical work and then move to the headquarters. But that wasn't something that I wanted. And then another opening in Antrix opened up. So you guys know Antrix is the commercial wing in ISRO. It was, kind of still is. So yeah, but then I couldn't really. So there was an announcement for a position in Antrix, and I applied for it, but somehow I also didn't get through that. So I realized my options within ISRO were closed, and that's when I seriously started considering getting into another ecosystem. And then I thought the best way to do it is perhaps to just pursue a master's. That way it's easier to get your foot in, right, into the other ecosystem. And then I started looking at the masters. But then a lot of these master programs were, because I'm from an avionics background, a lot of these masters were not suitable for me because they were all more to do with the aerospace aspects, the mechanical engineering aspects like structures or aerodynamics or fluid dynamics or stuff like this. So there were hardly any master programs that catered to satellite systems or the electronics aspects, electronics or the ICT aspects of satellite technology. And there was one master program in the US. But then, you guys know in the US, you can't really work in the space sector due to these ITAR regulations as a non-citizen, as a citizen of, as a non-American. So US was off the charts. And then I started looking at other countries like Germany. I came across a really good program in Germany. So that's Master of Space Engineering, and they focus on satellites. So, and this course was at TU Berlin, the Technical University of Berlin, which is again very interesting because TU Berlin has a very interesting student satellite. I wouldn't say student satellite, but they have a very long heritage of university satellites. So actually the satellite from TU Berlin is one of the first university built satellites, or one of the first foreign satellites that ISRO had launched. So they also have, the German space scene also has very close ties and bonds with ISRO. So TU Berlin was quite interesting. And then at one of the events, so I've also been parallelly, I told you, right? I've been attending all these events and I've been trying to meet people. And that's when I ran into the Berlin Space Technologies, the head of Berlin Space Technologies, my current company. And we had a brief chat. We met each other at a couple of events, got introduced to each other by my friends here in India. And then one day I was telling him, hey, I'm considering doing a master program in Germany, and I'm looking at two different universities, one in Munich, one in Berlin. And then immediately he offered me a student position. He said, if you choose to come to Berlin, then I'm happy to offer you a student job. You can work with my company. You can work on satellite development. And that was, that kind of sealed the deal for me, because till then in ISRO, I was just working on the downstream, as in the ground segment parts, right? So my job was at ISRO essentially was to develop algorithms and implement algorithms to process the satellite data. So we didn't really have much to do with satellite design as such. So this was really interesting to me. It's like, okay, ground segment is sorted. I've experienced this. Now I want to check out the upstream. Now I want to try building some satellites. And yeah, so this was quite interesting. And this was 2017 that I made a call. There was a huge backlash from my family, from my colleagues, from my boss. Of course, everybody had my best interests at heart, but they were really shocked that I wanted to quit a sarkari naukri, like an ISRO job. And then after 5 years, and they said, oh my God, you're so old, you're 27, you should not be making these huge career changes now. And nobody was on board, but somehow that's what I realized I had to do. I took a leap of faith, and yeah, I resigned. And I'm happy to share that all my colleagues, the entire chain of command in ISRO were really, really supportive of my decision. And all my paperwork, everything was processed very quickly. And then, yeah, I made the big jump. And funnily, my mom actually was like really, really scared. So my flight was about to leave in 2 hours, and then my mom was still skeptical. She's like, oh my God, will you get a job outside? Will you get a job in Germany? So I think she had this mental image of me never getting a job in space and then coming back as a huge failure. So yeah, so everybody was really skeptical, because Germany is a very weird place, right? For Indians, usually we go to, for Indian families, the US or Australia or the UK. Basically, the English-speaking countries are the default choice if you want to go abroad. But Germany was like super weird. But yeah, somehow I came here. And I think I was also quite lucky because I already had my student job. So as soon as I started my master program, within a couple of months, I had my student contract. And I was also working on the side as a student. And this really helped me because there's only so much you can learn from a master program, right? I personally believe that a lot of learning happens outside the classes. Within the class, you just learn how to use a toolbox, whatever skill be it, programming or some tools or some physics knowledge or whatever it is. It's just uh, a class, or the university coursework just teaches you how to use these toolboxes, but the actual experience is always outside of the university. So yeah, I started working there as a student. And for my master thesis, actually, I wanted to do something researchy, because where I was doing my student job, it was very engineering focused. We had customers, we had to deliver stuff. But for my master thesis, I wanted to do like proper research. And then I approached the very randomly in one of the events here. I approached the DLR, the German Aerospace Center. I just walked up to these guys and said, "Hey, I'm my background is FPGA. I previously worked with ISRO, and I'm looking for a thesis in the area of FPGAs. Do you have something?" And I guess luckily, fortunately, they had something. They had a requirement for exactly my kind of role there, and then they offered me a student job as well as a thesis. And so usually, so one thing I'd like to point out is all student jobs or thesis or internships or any kind of work that you do is always paid, right? Because one of the questions, somebody had asked a question, I think, how to land some paid internships, because only in India we have this concept of paid and unpaid internships. Actually, an unpaid internship outside of India is illegal. You're not supposed to make anybody work unless you're giving them something in return. So you should either give them like for example, a thesis, right? If I'm doing my thesis, then the work I do for an entity, for be it a research agency or some company or anything, I have to get something in return, either in the form of money or some credit towards my coursework, right? So, so yeah, so they wanted me to do my thesis work, but also they wanted me to work alongside because they wanted me to develop some IP course and some FPGA development. So I also did that. And they also offered me a position eventually, a full-time position at DLR, but I was more inclined to continue with my job at Berlin Space Technologies because for different reasons, I really liked the crowd there, and it was more fun. So yeah, I finished my thesis at the German Aerospace Center. Another thing that I'd like to say is, especially in Germany and most of Europe, people do their bachelor courses for easily for up to 5 years. So the average period to finish your bachelor course is 5 years. Even if it's a 4-year course, people take their own sweet time. And master courses, they do it for like 3 or 3.5 years. And I personally did my master's for about 3.5 years, and I spent 1 year working on my thesis. So that's because a lot of people, alongside their coursework, they also do these student jobs in the industry, in the area of their interest. So along with university education, you're also getting a lot of practical knowledge, and that also kind of makes it easier for you to eventually land opportunities, because if you are already a student, you have one foot inside the door, and then it's easier to get in. So yeah, so I took my own sweet time to do the masters. And afterwards, so I finished it in 2020, 2019 December. And last year, 2020, I started my full-time job. Yeah, it's been super fun. Currently I am so my work at Berlin Space Technologies is, we are a team of 35 people. So we built these 100 kilograms class satellites, Earth observation satellites primarily, and I'm part of the software team. But essentially, it's an embedded systems role. You don't have any pure software in satellites, right? Because you're actually building hardware. So I develop these command and data handling systems and the automation systems, basically everything that has to do with intelligence. Anything that has a processor, I work on it. So that's my job. I'm a development engineer there. I've been with these guys for almost 3.5 years now. And yeah, and then at the end of, I think before previous Christmas, I got the pandemic. We've been closed since last March, and we still have this crazy lockdown happening here. You probably know all the cases in Europe. So it's been really frustrating. You can't meet people, you can't do things. And so I thought, what's the best way to meet, because when you go to an event or a conference, you end up meeting a lot of interesting people. You just run into them and then, hey, what are you doing, where are you from, and blah blah blah, and then you try to stay in touch with them. So, but it's, even though you have a lot of online events, it has been really difficult to foster those relationships and reach out to people. So I thought, okay, there's how about I reach out to people on LinkedIn and record this conversation and turn it into a podcast. So that's how I started my Those Space People podcast. And yeah, it's been, I think I released some 5 episodes till now. It's going quite well. And it's super fun recording and editing and everything. And what else? Yeah, I'm also part of a few networking groups here, try to organize events and meetups and so on and so forth. And yeah, I think that's about me. Oh God, I'm bored talking about myself for so long. So,
Yes, ma'am. It was indeed an amazing introduction. I guess we'll move on to the interactive part of the session, which you were looking forward to. So there
yeah.
are a lot of questions at the chat box. So there are two options. We will start out from the questions in the chat box. Once the questions in the chat box are over, if the attendees wish, they could raise their hands and we will give them the opportunity to ask their question out live. So let us start from the questions from the chat box. So Dinesh N asks, what is the best space thing to do after BTech in mechanical engineering?
Okay. First of all, it completely depends on your interest, because passion is what drives you, especially in the space industry. And I think one thing I really want to emphasize is space jobs pay very less. Okay. So there are too many aerospace engineers in the world. There are too few aerospace jobs, and aerospace jobs are actually very boring because there's a lot of proposals. You have to write a lot of work, you have to document, like every single change you do you have to document, and it's very very boring. That's second. And they pay really peanuts because space jobs, the margins for the companies are very low, so peanuts. So in spite of all these things, if you really want to work in the space sector, you should really be driven, you should be obsessed with space, right? So unless you really follow your passion, and that something that just makes you jump out of your bed every morning, do not pursue space, because you will really get disillusioned. So what's the best space thing to do is depends on you. It depends on what interests you, what excites you. um, but generally speaking, I would really recommend getting some sort of a lot of people jump into these master programs right as soon as you finish your BTech. I think a lot of people think, okay, let me finish my masters, let me quickly do a PhD, let me quickly, they don't do these things quickly. Nothing's running out, you're still super young. So generally, I would recommend anybody to first start working after you do your bachelor's, because it teaches you a lot of things. It teaches you what you like, what you enjoy, what you don't enjoy. Uh, it teaches you a lot of things about yourself. So I would recommend anybody to find any kind of a job, work at it one year, 2 years, or 6 months, and then think about if you really want to do a master's and why. So I think the best thing is try to find some work. Hope I
Yes,
answered
ma'am.
it.
I guess
Yeah.
that is a good answer, and I hope the attendee you asked it is satisfied. We'll move on to the next question. This is from Satyapriya Das from IIST. So he's asking about his question is this: how can dual degree students pursue? What should they pursue after they have completed their masters? And um, so what should
Yeah, yeah,
they
I
pursue
have got.
after
Yeah, I
master?
read that. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. So if you really want to go into the astronomy and astrophysics, there are a couple of institutes. I'm sure you know these institutes, right? There's IUCA and there's AIA, IIA, Indian Institute of Astrophysics. There are these places you can try to see what positions they have, and you can look at their requirements. Do they require a PhD, or do they have any research positions open? You can do that. Um, Other master courses, yeah, see, that's the thing, right? Unfortunately, in India, we don't have much going on in astronomy and astrophysics because we haven't invested much in this. But you should definitely look into Ayuka and these places. And I used to think about, okay, and then PhD. Maybe perhaps just for this stream, I guess immediately going for PhD makes sense because you don't really have many avenues, right? You can't really work in a company, not many companies. So you should definitely look at, if you want to look at PhD options, yeah, the world is your oyster. Like just look up which area interests you, look up courses. Um, Try to find someone who can introduce you or make a personal connection because a lot of times cold calls don't make sense, don't get answers, people don't answer to you, cold calls. Yeah, I'm sorry, man. I don't know if I answered your question, dude, but yeah.
Yeah, so the next question is from Vatsalya Gupta. How well does shifting teams or even centers work out in ISRO?
It completely depends. Okay, shifting teams. So within the center, if you want to go from one department to the other or one section to another, it completely depends on your boss, the relationship of your boss with their boss, and so on and so forth. And also the same chain in your target group, right? So your source location and your target location, all this matters. People have done it, it's possible, but there's no generic answer. It totally depends. It's possible. And shifting between centers, you have to, most cases, you have to find a mutual transfer. So basically, someone who's willing to, exchange places with you. And for example, if you are, I don't know, if you're in Mahendragiri and you want to go to Bangalore, it's very difficult because everyone wants to go to Bangalore. Very few people want to go to Mahendragiri. So it depends on where you are. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think we can do the next one.
Yeah. So the next question is from Shashank Tomar. How does one gather the courage to leave a job with responsibilities and the associated uncertainty, especially when going for something like a startup instead of an extended education like masters?
Wow, okay. Firstly, if you have, it's very difficult if you have financial obligations or responsibilities, right? So if you have a family to support, or if you have to support your parents or some big loan, then of course it's very difficult. Uh, but otherwise, also it's difficult because there's a lot of peer pressure on you. And maybe now it's easier because a lot of people started, at least a lot of people from IIST started leaving ISRO. But still, even those who are trying to leave, there's a lot of pressure, especially from the family. And of course, there's uncertainty, right? So if you, ISRO is a very, very secure job. You will never get this kind of a security in other places. And you always have to prove yourself, but it depends on ultimately what you want. If you want something that you've never done before, then you should do something that you've never done before, right? It sounds a little cheesy, but yeah, that's true. Startup is a different game entirely. I know a lot of my friends who did a startup life is very, very stressful. It's it's not a career option, it's a lifestyle choice. So you have to be married to it for at least 5 years. Don't expect anything else. And it really helps if you have some financial backing from your family or from your savings or so on. But yeah, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
How
So
do you? Yeah, I mean, how do you get the motivation? It's th- th- maybe one thing is people have done it. There are actually a lot of podcasts where there are a lot of startup founders talking about their struggles, how they've tried to make ends meet. Maybe you can listen to them and you can get the inspiration. Yeah.
yeah. So moving on, Anmol Jain wants to know whether you have any tips for avionic students at IIST.
Okay. Tips for first year avionics students. Yeah, just have fun, man. Like just have fun. That's very, very important. And try to really get your basics right. There's a lot of YouTube, there's a lot of free content on YouTube. So feel free to look at these videos, get your basics right, and uh, firstly, yeah, have fun. Just try to have as much fun as possible. Okay, we can, I think, do the next.
Yeah. So, what was the required
Yeah.
German proficiency slash qualification for your work and education?
Okay, firstly, space is quite international. So the working language in most space companies is English, unless they are dealing exclusively just with the government, right? For example, if it's a German company that only does contracts for the German Aerospace Center, then of course everything is in German. But as such, you don't really need a lot of German proficiency for space jobs in Germany. A lot of them are very international. For example, my company, we have a bunch of internationals, and even if I am the only non-German in the group, everyone switches to English, and all our documentation, everything is done in English because our customers are all international customers. So you wouldn't need much in Germany. But if you're going to France, yeah, definitely you will need a lot of French, and it depends on the country. But Germany, not much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, moving on, Shantanu Shakya has this question. Can you please tell how one can go abroad if he or she belongs to a very poor background?
Okay, so there are a lot of master programs that have very little tuition fee, and a lot of them have zero tuition fee. So I've made a list of these master programs in my blog. Actually, I can share the link. Maybe I will post it. Yeah, because you're from IST, I will share it in the IST Facebook group, or forward it to you, the organizers here. There are a decent number of programs that have very low tuition fee, so you can definitely pursue those. And there are also a few grants available that you can do it. In Europe, basically, it's much easier. In the US or other countries, it's very expensive, but Europe, it's possible. Yeah, next one.
So, moving on, Gautam has this question. What is the major difference that you found between working in ISRO and the Berlin space industry?
Okay, that's a very drastic comparison, right? Because one is this huge space agency, which is run on taxpayer money. So obviously they're more answerable. And the other is a commercial company. So maybe a good comparison would be between the space agencies of these two countries. Surprisingly, German Aerospace Center and the ISRO in our space agency are very similar. It's uh, But one thing that was quite interesting at DLR, the German Aerospace Center, was so when I was working as a student assistant, so I was just a student assistant, one of the at the bottom of the hierarchies. I was reporting to these engineers, and I actually had access. So I was working on this really cool project. It's called MMX mission. It's a sample return mission to the moon of Mars. So it was a collaboration with JAXA, and they, these Hayabusa cool things, right? The way they do, like there's one rover that lands on a planetary body, and then there's another orbiter, and then the rover identifies um, the location, and then the orbiter sweeps in and collects a sample and then brings it back. So it was the super cool mission. A lot of space agencies were involved in it, and I, as one of the bottommost people in the hierarchy, had access to the code base, and I could directly push my commits, into that code. So that's something I found really fascinating. And there were a lot of high school students actually who were coming and working with me in my room, who were also doing. Of course, they were not involved in these super crazy projects, but they also did a lot of stuff for DLR. So what I realized is the system, the entire system at DLR is built so robustly that even if I really screw something up massively, it's not gonna destroy everything that they've built. So they have so much resilience built into their systems that they can also extract work from people who are working part time. So this, I guess, something that would really take a long time, perhaps, or maybe it's not in the roadmap of ISRO. This I don't really see happening at ISRO, but this is something really cool at DLR. Of course, Berlin Space in Space Technologies is a very small company. It has 35 people and it's all young people, and There's no comparison, dude. It's super fun. Like there's no crazy hierarchy. I don't have to write my application or jump through too many hoops. I can just WhatsApp my boss saying, hey, I'm sick today, I won't come, or hey, this something happened. So it's easier to communicate and everything is quicker. Yeah. Yeah, I think we can do the
So
next one.
yeah, so this is a question from Naitham Ritik Anand, and I guess this is a
Nice.
question that all of us have. Is it
Hmm.
normal to get bored or uninterested in study work in the middle of a semester in IIST?
Totally, of course, definitely. Because wait, where is this? What does it? Okay, you're just collecting. Okay. Yeah, definitely. Oh my God, I bunked. I got like a 9 point something in my first semester because I was so studious and all that. I did nothing but study. And then I think by the time in my third or fourth semester, I got a 7.2 or something. So I became like instantly black sheep in the family. And then I think by sixth semester, I had attendance. I had a shortage of attendance because I was so bloody bored. I would prefer simply sitting in my room to attending a class because it was so boring. And this was back in ancient times. Okay, this was when we didn't have student activity building. We had jack shit. We had nothing at IST. It was super hot, but I would still prefer to sit in my room. So of course you'll get very bored. Uh, because that's how our systems are, right? You have like so many subjects to study, and you have so many. You don't really have time to dive deep into something. By the time, because by the time you are like gained interest in something, then the next exams, those next what are these called? The tests. We have these three times the
Oh,
tests.
quizzes.
Quizzes, yeah, yeah, yeah. So you have the next quiz coming, and it's just too much. Only when I came to do my masters here did I realize I would hardly take like so all the Indian students, like all my other colleagues, a lot of them were Indians, a lot of the other students. So all my other classmates here in Germany. So a lot of these people, all the Indians would try to take like as many credits as possible. They used to like spend like at least 8 or 9 hours at the university attending classes. But these Germans were like so chilled out. They would just take uh, I don't know, like 4 or 5 credits. They would hardly spend 2 or 3 hours at the university every day. And sometimes when they got really sick and tired, they would just take a semester off. So they would just take the semester off, take their backpack, and just go backpacking around Europe, living a typical poor student life. So, of course, here education is free, so you can do all that. But it's definitely possible to get bored. Unfortunately, there's nothing you can do about it. So, yeah, just accept it. And yeah, you do get bored.
So building on that question itself, this question was asked by other students during their registrations too. So how did you manage to come out of that boredom? So how did you balance both academics and you know
Um,
chill time?
yeah, so of course, living on the campus, one way definitely you get to make jokes or about the subject, or you get to you can vent it out with your classmates. And I used to immerse myself in a lot of other activities. So, for example, when you're really sick and tired of studying for something, just take a break, do something that really excites you. I don't know, building a website or updating some blog or anything that really play an instrument or go do something. So try to break your time into small chunks, uh, because if you like, for example, if you think I need to study today or I need to finish this assignment, and then you see this huge mountain in front of you, a 4 hour assignment ahead of you, you will never get the motivation to do it, right? So just say, okay, I'm going to do this for 30 minutes, put an alarm. When that alarm rings, just do something that really is enjoyable, and then come back, and that helps. That's one. So splitting your work into 30-minute or X amount discrete chunks helps. And talking to people, engaging, and uh, it's very beautiful. Just go for a run. That's one thing I kind of regret. I should have hiked, explored a lot of things around the campus much more. Just go for a, unless it's in the middle of summer and it's super blazing hot, just take a walk, or just go run and come, and then do it. uh, but then also remember that it comes to an end. It's just like 4 years. It seems like a lot, but 4 years is a very very short time. It just passes away. So maybe this helps. I don't know.
Yeah, sure, ma'am. So Asif Muhammad has this question. How much does having experience as an ISRO scientist help you in your career? Does it help?
Yeah, it definitely helps because ISRO, of course, ISRO is a brand. It's very popular. It's very renowned across the country, across the world. Of course, in the country, yes, even across the world. That's how I actually landed my DLR internship and my position at DLR, the German Aerospace Center. So it definitely helps. It's a big brand for jobs and for also masters. So yeah.
Yeah, so moving on, can anyone switch to DRDO from ISRO?
Yes, you can. A lot of people have done it. There's this one senior who became a helicopter pilot. So he was with ISAC. He was from avionics, Apurv Mehta. Maybe you guys should reach out to him. So he did this, and you don't really have to pay the bond because it's within whatever government of India. Yeah, so he was an avionics graduate, first batch, worked with ISAC for a couple of years, and then he became a helicopter pilot, and now he's riding an helicopter in the Andamans and doing like a lot of exotic stuff. So it's possible.
So yeah, sure. Maybe we'll call Apuro Mehta also as a guest speaker one day.
Yeah, yeah.
Sure. So moving on, there's this question from Harsh Saria. What does it go at the back of one's mind while taking such risks like leaving ISRO jobs? And also, what if we fail after trying these out?
Okay, so I think the biggest fear we have is the fear of failure, right? So we are so scared of the pain that will bring us. So yeah, it's okay. So let's say you fail. What's the worst thing that can happen? The worst thing. Okay, you quit a job, you go abroad, or you do something else. Everything fails. You are left bankrupt, or you are left. I don't know, without no money, no food. Just come back to your parents, or come back to somebody. I'm sure somebody will be ready to give you food. So how I go about it is, if I have roti kapda makan, I'm not even makan, man. I mean, my parents, I could just crash at my parents' couch. So if I have food 3 times a day or 2 times a day, I think that's sorted for me. Because if you, like I said, if you want something that you've never had before, you have to do things that you've never done before. So if you can't take a risk, then you won't get the crazy benefits that you get. So you just have to take the risk. So the what goes on in the back of the mind is this fear of failure. So everyone basically, it's a human instinct to avoid pain. Now, all of us want to avoid pain, right? And that's the basics of, for example, I don't know if you guys learn martial arts. That's what they say. You have to know your pain. If you're scared of pain, if you're scared of injuries, you can't do anything. You can't, I don't know, learn skateboarding. You can't do sports. You can do nothing. So so one advice is try to fail as much as you can. Try to do a lot of any crazy things that you can, so long as they don't take you on a path of self-destruction, of course. Yeah, as in I'm talking about drugs and crazy shit like this. Okay, so don't do that. So try to fail as many times. Try to attempt new things. Try to do whatever random bizarre things at college. Fail, get used to this idea of failing, because once you fail, you fall down and then you pick yourself up. You know that nothing happens. So you have to realize basically that failure is not bad. Failure is not the end of the world. So failure is good, and fail fast. It's better that you fail and pick yourself up and heal when you're 20 rather than when you're 80 or 60, right? So I would totally recommend you guys to fail, to experience failure as much as possible. Hey, that first year avionics student was also asking, right? So yeah, burn as many circuits as you can, fail as many times as you can. So normalize failure. Yeah.
I'm sure the electronics lab back at IIST is going to be facing a huge bill.
Yeah. So I'm not going to take. Don't. Yeah, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying burn stuff. Maybe burn like a small resistor and capacitor, not the whole lab.
Yeah, sure. So this is a question from Shivan Sripati. When you start a job at ISRO, Do you get the opportunity to work on different subsystems and find out where your interest lies?
I very unlikely. I don't think so because first of all, different ISRO centers work on different parts of the rocket, right? Like the whole space program. So you have one place you have these launch vehicle, one place you have the engines, the other place there's this integration, and one in SAC, for example, you have all the payload stuff happening, and the satellite, all the attitude dynamics, and the satellite bus itself is happening in ISAC. So first of all, these subsystems themselves are kind of spread out. And let's say you go to ISAC, that's where a lot of subsystems work is happening. Um, yeah, there it's or SAC, where also a lot of work is happening. It's very difficult. You can't just choose. Yeah, I don't. At least maybe if the director of the center you go to is like super cool and chilled out about it, and if they have a really positive opinion on IAST and IASTians, maybe you get an opportunity to choose. But I don't think they would let you work on something for a few months and then choose something else, because the whole idea of ISRO is they discourage people from moving between departments, because let's say you've been working on one subsystem or one area for about 5 years for X amount of time. That means you've amassed all this experience, right? And not all experience can be translated. You can't document everything. You will know a lot of things intuitively, and they don't want to lose this the intuitive knowledge that you have by transferring you to a different department. So it's very difficult. It does happen sometimes, but it's like I said, it depends on your boss, it depends on who's around you and everything. Yeah.
So moving on, this is a question that Wasim had sent. So how do you spoke a lot about getting these contacts. So how do you go about building contacts and meeting people and such?
Yeah, that's interesting. So, um, reaching out to reaching out to people online. I'm talking about pre-COVID. Okay, reaching out to people online only takes you so far, because all these cool people that you want to reach out to. For example, I'm not like super cool. I'm just a very beginner in this game, and I get about, I don't know, like 50 requests to connect and like tens of messages every single day, right? So I'm sure people who a person that you would like to reach out to gets like hundreds of these messages and hundreds of this. So online doesn't the success rate is very low to reach new people and foster relationships. So the best way is to attend these events. Try to attend as many events. There's a lot of events and there's a lot of conferences going on. So try to attend these, and yeah, try to chat with people. So often it helps, right? So one thing you always have in mind, let's say you're a student, and there are too many students at all these conferences and events, right? So first of all, why would the person that you would like to meet give you time or give you attention? So you have to give something to them in this conversation. So you try to do your research. For example, let's say you want to try to connect to somebody who's working on FPGAs, or somebody who's working on these uh, what's the mechanical term, on fluid dynamics or something, right? So try to do research, which companies are doing this, are these companies going to be there at this event, and try to go and tell them, hey, try instead of like randomly saying, hey, I'm a student and just standing there, you tell them, hey, this is my interest and this is what I've done, and I find this work that you're doing, or I find this product in your company very interesting, can you tell me about it? And then you ask them about, are there any opportunities, are there any internships, I've done blah blah blah, I'm interested in blah blah blah. So do your homework and turn it into a meaningful conversation rather than just manifesting there. And yeah, try do your homework basically on whoever you try to meet.
Yeah. So this is a question from an IASTN. Riaz asks, after finishing your degree, can he get a good job from something other than the space industry?
Yeah, totally. Okay. First of all, what's a good, it depends on what a good job is. Mm, so yeah, totally. See, if you're talking about avionics, I think avionics is quite um, versatile, because we can also get into the electronics or ECE. We kind of have an overlap with ECE students or IT or software engineers. So I think for avionics is you can try to end up at a few companies. Uh, I don't know for aerospace. I think you guys are too domain specific to find something unless you do. I don't know, an aerospace PhD. There's a lot of aerospace astrophysics people who've done PhDs in astrophysics working as in the finance sector, right? So unless you're at that level, I think it's quite difficult. But I think one route is a bunch of IISTians have, if they wanted to get out of the space industry, one route they've taken is do an MBA. So you can try to get into an MBA program and then, branch off from there. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. So this is the next question is from Parthasarathi Samantha. A lot of people have upvoted this question. Is an integrated MS PhD more beneficial than just MS? When you consider factors like academic benefit, and also if one wants to, start a startup in the future.
It essentially depends on what you're trying to do, right? So the difference between a master program and a PhD is if you want to go really deep into a subject, if you want to, or if you want to enter the academia and become a researcher, professor, and so on, then of course PhD, integrated MS PhD makes sense because PhD is eventually what you want to do. It depends on what you want to do. If you want to get into academia or do a research career, then do a MS PhD makes sense. But if you want to do a startup, considering startup opportunities, as in to work with, okay, I'm assuming, so two things. So let's say you want to work in a startup. They don't really care about an integrated PhD. It doesn't really matter about your degree. It depends on what work that you've actually done. You don't have to do a PhD program or any program. Startups just look at what actual work you've done and your skill set. Nobody really cares about your degrees or GPAs. And secondly, if you want to have a startup on your own, then also degrees don't make sense. I mean, it doesn't matter. You just have to have a vision, a real passion, and then you have to go in that direction. I don't know. Did I answer this?
Yeah, I guess that's fine. Moving on.
Yeah.
There are these bunch of questions about your plans for the future. Are you planning to come back to India, or what is your career path going to be from this point on?
Okay. No, I don't think I would. I mean, I've already. ISRO is, firstly, it's an amazing place. It's a great place. They're doing a lot of interesting, exciting things. But I don't think I will come back to ISRO. But however, I'm still very closely connected to the space community in India. I'm actually part of this New Space India community. I'm one of the first members of this, and I also kind of moderate it. You guys should really check out the New Space India community. It's on, they have a Discord server. They're also recently on Signal and they're also on Slack. So just Google it. It's quite nice. They also have a really good podcasts. Um, so I want to be connected to the space community in India. I still am. Uh, but I would not come back to ISRO. No, it's growing every year. I basically want to explore different ecosystems. So now, for example, for the last 3 years, I've been in the European space ecosystem. So it's a very different ball game. I'm trying to understand here, trying to create a network here and understand people. And maybe in a few years, I will try to explore some other space ecosystem. So I would prefer to travel every 5 or 6 years to different geographies and explore those systems. But I will always be connected to India. Yeah. And to IIST, of course.
Of course, once an ISTN, always an ISTN.
Yeah, totally.
So the next most popular question is about opportunities in general. Opportunities for masters, opportunities for PhDs, opportunities for work. A lot of questions are about that. So could you give maybe a generalized answer, or at least point the people to where to look?
Okay, so I'll start with avionics students, right? So avionics students, there are a lot of space. So outside ISRO, there are a bunch of companies in India. Just Google space companies in India. There are a lot of startups coming up. There's Skyroot, there's Agnikul, there's Bellatrix. There's also Sat Sure by one of our alumni, Pratik Basu. And there's also this Cell Propulsion. So these guys do build electric vehicles. You should really check it out, Cell Propulsion. That's also from the first batch students of IIST. So there are a lot of jobs, of course, in the world. There are a few jobs in India. There are a lot of courses for avionics students. Like I said, I'll share you the link to my blog. So I've actually um, listed out a lot of master programs. Yeah, there are a lot of opportunities. So once you can, so speaking of job opportunities, you can work in a bunch of companies, the ones that I mentioned in India, and trying to get a job in the space sector without being a student outside of India is a little tricky because you have to know people, networking matters a lot. So the easiest way for you to find a job for anybody, avionics, aerospace, whatever background outside of India in the space industry, I think the easiest way would be to come as a student and do a master program. And when you're a student, it's very easy to get these internships or student jobs where you have one foot in the door and it's very easy for you to get a full-time job. And you can also experiment with different things. And it's also possible to get a job. For example, DLR, the German Aerospace Center, these guys are quite international. So they accept applications from across the world, and you can also try to apply there, but it's much easier if you're here. So that's for jobs. And if you want to do master universities, then yeah, you can do a lot of courses. You can do PhD programs, you can do courses. You can also branch out into, you don't really have to stick to space, You can also branch out. For example, there are a bunch of ISTNs who are working in quantum computing, people who did avionics branched off into physics, they worked for a few years at ISRO and they realized, no, my true passion lies in physics or this compute or, advanced mathematical computing or this or that. And people have branched off, so you can do that. And so we've covered PG courses. Yeah, like I said, I would really recommend you guys immediately after bachelor's to at least try to work somewhere in some industry, something related to space, or even if it's not related to space, something that's related to your stream, right? Try to work, try to get an experience, try to understand how the real world works. Because what we see in IIST is very different from what we do outside. So I would highly recommend anyone to get any sort of work experience and then apply for master programs or PhD or whatever later. Yeah, I think that answers it, right?
Yep. Another question is from Shivansh Tripati. How much does one's CGPA matter when considering going for masters and such in Europe, US? And how much is good enough? Do you have a hard limit?
So only for master courses they ask your GPA, but then I think if it's more than 7, it should be okay. Again, it depends on which course you're applying for. If it's a highly sought after course, the thumb rule is if it's a free course and if it's then usually there is a lot of participants, so your GPA is given a weightage, but it's usually 5 to 10%, I guess, depending on the university. And if you're like for example your statement of purpose is quite good, or if if you're from ISRO, then usually it's quite easy to get into any place. And if you're right after bachelor, if you don't have ISRO experience, yes, then GPA of course matters, and also your other scores like GRE, blah blah blah, all these scores. I don't think more than 10 to 15%, maximum 15%, I guess. And for jobs in Europe, till now nobody's asked me about my CGPA, so nobody really cares about your GPA. And they can actually, if an expert isn't okay, sorry, I think there's a lot of disturbance, right?
Yeah, there's a slight disturbance.
Yeah. So let me just close my door. Just give me 1 moment. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. In the meantime, if any of the attendees have questions that were not answered, please do.
Yeah, sorry, my partner, I think, was having a very excited phone call, I guess. So yeah. GPA for jobs, nobody really cares. In India, also now people are not really caring because they know there's a huge difference between what value you can give to the company versus your GPA, right? I wouldn't focus too much on the GPA. Just try to get maybe a 7, 7.5, but try to get your basics right. Even if you flunk that okay, and don't flunk that subject, even if you get a very bad grade, try to understand. It doesn't matter how you perform in the test, it matters how much you know that subject. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. So here's a personal question from Anmol Jain. Did you have any regrets that you had while graduating from IIST? Do you want, can you recommend things for us to do that you missed?
Oh, okay. Wow. Mm, it's been a long time. Yeah, like don't be afraid to fail. And what did I miss? Yeah, I actually missed running. You know, I should have taken up running. I only started running like 3 years after I graduated. You know, it's so beautiful outside. IST, go for a run. Uh, Apart from crazy things like this, oh yes, I totally regret not learning Malayalam. Guys, please learn Malayalam. I have never thought in my life, it's like Malayalam, why the fuck will I ever need Malayalam? So I'm not from, I don't know Malayalam. I'm from the south of India, but I don't, unfortunately. So I never thought I would need it. Um, but it's always amazing to learn new languages, especially when you come outside of India. It's like super cool. Uh, you can watch a lot of these movies. You can connect with a lot of the culture, and also it kind of rewires your brain. You know, when you're learning new languages, it's a very amazing experience. So try to learn Malayalam. And regrets, not really actually. It was I had fun, or maybe I have a very optimistic memory. You know, maybe I've blocked all the regrets.
Yeah, sure. We'll keep this in mind. At least one word that IISTians would have learned in Malayalam is "ஒரு ticket ISRO Junction," or something like.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
guess that covers most of the questions, as the other questions are about opportunities and such. We have a little time left.
Yeah,
Anyone would,
so yeah. So Arun, I think one point I'd like to, yeah, I just took a, yeah, shall I make a few
yeah,
points
sure,
maybe
sure,
that might
sure.
cover them? Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So someone is wants to talk about this private industry participation, right? So right now what's happening in India is till now all the space activity has been the primary focus, or the primary, you know, initiator of all the space activities has been ISRO. But now there's a lot of companies, and uh, the biggest aspect is more than these companies. The government of India is taking a lot of active initiative in pushing this, right? So till now it's somebody is also talking about these upstream and downstream. So there's a huge untapped potential in the downstream sector. So downstream is basically all these satellite applications, be it communication or earth observation, all these applications. So downstream is really untapped. And now a lot of, for example, a lot of state governments, the Kerala has set up this Kerala Space Park, but yeah, that got into some controversy, whatever. But even Telangana government is trying to set up space parks, and they're trying to, you know, invest a lot into space applications. So now a lot of government departments, state governments are taking initiative. So they want to try to figure out how you can use satellite images to do, for example, asset monitoring. You know, like they want to monitor lake encroachment, or they want to monitor some construction activity, or farmlands, or like agri insurance, agriculture, blah blah blah. So there's a lot of untapped potential in the downstream in this application. So that's one area you guys can really look into. All the I don't know, the GIS enthusiasts, or people who are interested, that's going to be huge, not only in India but across the world. And upstream, so the thing is, upstream is it's upstream, you know, building rockets or satellites is, it's always going to be the sexy part of doing space. But it's like I said, there's an oversupply of engineers, there's an oversupply of especially mission analysis experts. You know, all of us have keep playing this Kerbal space program, but these jobs, the Kerbal Space Program, the KSP kind of jobs are like very, very few, and there's already an oversupply. So upstream is not really, I would say, doesn't have a lot of scope unless you want to get into areas such as active debris removal, or in orbit tracking or on orbit servicing. But still, these companies are very few, and it's still kind of upcoming. So I would say the biggest potential, the largest potential, is in the applications. You really have to get into this if you're interested. That's one space. And how long does it take to get into the upstream jobs at ISRO? No, like 10 years. I did not mean that. Oh, no, no, no. So what I meant about my 10 years is, usually, you know the hierarchy, right? There are a lot of ISRO centers spread across the country, and then there's the headquarters, which is the headquarters in Bangalore. So usually the people who are sitting there are the decision makers, and they don't normally take young people or entry level people into the headquarters. Usually the ones who are at the headquarters are people who've spent 10 years in a center doing technical work, and then they go on to these decision making roles. So that's what I said. But now it's changing a lot, right? Because you have this the new human space flight thing coming up, and there's a lot of and there's also this in space. So there's a lot of people, there are a lot of people that are taking people into this in space and headquarters, and then there's a lot of shuffling around. So yeah, I just wanted to clarify that. Mathematics research, I wouldn't think so, at least not as far as I know, but I may be wrong. Sorry. Yeah, I think Arun, I kind of answered, right?
Yeah, I
Is there
guess
any? Yeah, yeah.
I guess we have answered most of the questions. Yeah, that is about it.
Yeah,
So,
internships for IISTians. Yeah, there are actually, you guys. I don't know if you already do this, but you already know this. But SatSure offers a lot of internships. These guys keep posting a lot of internships for IISTians. I don't know if you guys are in touch, Arun. The student activities. Are you guys, or is any other body in touch with these companies?
not really.
Like, there's supposed to be one body or one group, right, who's supposed to take care of all these, the placement cell. Oh yeah.
Yeah, the placement cell is developing,
Uh-huh.
so you don't really get a lot of information.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have, you did mention your blog having these links, right?
Yeah, but the thing is, to get internships and opportunities and all this, you really need to have a very live, ongoing relationship with these companies. So I would really say that maybe, since the placement cell is still, in their apps, maybe you guys can take an initiative, just temporarily perhaps, and keep in touch with these companies. At least the company started by IISTians, right? So there's a quantum computing company, there's SatSure, like I said, and there's also uh, Cell Propulsion. There's a bunch of other companies started by IISTians. Um, or maybe make a Facebook group, where identify some 20 or 30 alumni who are working in different places, and ask them to post internship opportunities there, or something like that. You can try to collect all the thing is, it's internship is not a one time thing, right? You keep getting the internships time and again. So someone has to actively maintain that.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
So I guess that concludes the sessions. Is there anything else that you see interesting that you would want to add?
Yeah, Elon Musk is here. Yeah, unfortunately, SpaceX is interplanetary, but it's not international yet, because of these ITAR regulations. As a non-citizen, you can't really work. You can work in ISRO, in NASA, actually. There's a bunch of Indians working in NASA, but these are all a lot of civilian mission roles, or mm, it's it's not quite easy to get into these positions. Oh, PhD. Okay. This is, yeah, German universities. It's usually the procedure is quite simple. Just check it out online academic fee is quite low for German universities. Uh, Actually, German universities, the programs are free, but some English courses do charge money, but it's still not as crazy as the American universities. But for space, I would really recommend you guys, unless you have personal savings or somebody backing you financially, do not take a loan and go for master's or higher studies, because it's just going to sit on your head and you will be so desperate after the master's to, clear this loan. So there are a lot of free options. And oh yeah, and one thing I'd really like to mention is a lot of times we think to get into the space industry, you have to do a master that is a space related master, right? But that's not really true. A lot of space industry jobs are very similar to these core engineering jobs, right? For example, in my company, in the software team, it's mostly it's except me, everybody is a software engineer. They did like a bachelor and a master in actual software engineering. So because in any company, space company, you require very few space experts. The others are all, you prefer them to come from these core engineering subjects like software engineering or VLSI or communications engineer or antenna RF engineer or something like this, or somebody who has a solid background in structures and fluid dynamics. So you don't necessarily have to do a space course if there is a subject that and there's another advantage to doing a generic master is, even if you can't find a space job immediately, you can find a job in the core sector, get some experience, and then you can always move to the space sector. So where people are hiring in space, they don't require you to do a space specific master. You just need to have the domain knowledge. Yeah. And
Yes,
yeah, I
ma'am.
think I
Yeah,
think we
that covers everything.
yeah, yeah.
So, is there
Yeah.
any? Yeah, so that was indeed a very interesting and fun session, ma'am. A lot of questions did get cleared. So, thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to come here. I would like to pass over the mic to Hari Krishnan to deliver the concluding remarks.
Hello, ma'am. So, on behalf of the panelists, I would like to thank everyone who attended this webinar. Thank you, Rachna ma'am, for being here with us today. The session was immensely delightful and refreshing, and I'm sure all the attendees have got a thing or two to take away from this webinar. Ma'am, would you like to add a few concluding words from your side, or any advice as such from us to us?
Yeah, it's been super fun. It's really nice to talk to you guys, see you guys, and connect. And I will share all these links that I've mentioned with the team. It's always fun. But yeah, guys, don't take life or things like too seriously. It's super, super, super fun. So try to have some fun. Try to uh, yeah, just try to have fun. Or if space doesn't work for you, it's okay. You don't have to stay in space. You can move out to other areas. Just do things that really excite you and interest you. And there are a lot of alumni who I'm sure would love to come on this platform, share their experiences. What I've said today, like what I've shared today, is just my perspective. And there are a lot of people in ISRO who absolutely love their jobs. They're doing really exciting things and who stay there. So it's outside ISRO, inside ISRO, in India, outside India, Mars, Earth. Essentially, it's you can always have fun. Whatever you like, you need to do. So it's doesn't really matter. So yeah, I think that's about it. Happy to. I'll share you links. You can listen to my podcast. I'll share all these links with you guys. Check it out. And is there some way? Is the Facebook group active, or like how do I communicate with the student community?
IASTeens is pretty active, but you could send any of us the links and we will ask Vav and we will make sure that it reaches. We will do our best to make sure that it reaches the participants since a lot of links were shared. But right now, I guess Ayush, can you share ma'am's LinkedIn page and her blog so that
The podcast link, those space people, is already been shared in the chat. You can see that.
Ah,
Also,
cool.
the link for New Space India Discord has been shared to the chat.
Awesome.
I'll just share the LinkedIn profile too.
Yeah, this Discord group New Space India, I mean, it has so many people, and you have even like fifth graders and like 10-year-old, 20-year-old, 12-year-old people also obsessed with space. So it's quite fun. Yeah.
and the blog too, ma'am's blog too, so that the attendees can get an idea. We will also do our best from our side to make sure that the links reach the participants.
Yeah.
Just to be on the safer side, we'll put it on the chat. Yes, we'll take a minute for that.
Yeah, sure.
And in other concluding remarks, this has been the first of our life after graduation talks. We thank you so much, ma'am, once again. We will do our best to contact more alumni from more different fields so that every one of us can get a wide spectrum of things that could be done. If there's anything you would like to tell us, please do let us know in the chat. Any feedback or any idea about who to call next, please do let us know. We'll wait for a minute or two before concluding. Thank you all very much for taking time out of your weekends to be here. Thank you so much. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you once again.
Yeah, fun session.
Sure, ma'am.
Bye, guys. So let's stay in touch. Ciao.
Sure.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
So the chat is enabled for all participants and attendees, so you can like chat out your questions, everything.
You can leave if you want. We are just here to collect feedback and then we'll end it.
Okay. Then I'll make a move. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you,
so
ma'am.
much.
Yeah. Bye, guys.
So we'll just wait for a minute or two for you guys to put in your feedback and then we'll end this meeting. All the links regarding her ma'am's personal blog, ma'am's LinkedIn profile, the Discord link, and there was something else. Her podcast link is also here. I think all these cover every link that ma'am told. If there is
Ma'am's personal website has every link to the podcast series, the link she mentioned earlier also. So you can check out her personal website.
Yes, so that is all. If there is anything else, do let us know. Team Sark bids you farewell. Thank you all for attending. Thank you so much.